Quantitatively, financial markets have exploded worldwide. The volume and the velocity of securities now traded dwarfs anything that I ever saw in the early career of my life in Wall Street. Yet we remain subject to regular upheaval, most notably in the recent financial crisis, the worst in 80 years. What is the underlying source of this turmoil? It is not the lack of technological knowledge, but how to structure and to trade securities. Rather, it seems to me our financial travail stems mainly from behavioral and ethical shortcomings, from regulatory failures, and from what I would call historical amnesia. We seem to have learned shocking little from past financial crises, and there have been many, some dating back many centuries, going back to the 14th century and even earlier. But that has Wall Street been a problem is, of course, well known. That prevailing culture began to change in the United States. Let me just go back on my text here. For a generation or so after World War II, financial behavior was sensible and moderate. The excess of the late 1920s, which many believed led directly to the long collapse that followed, was still fresh in the national consciousness. Now, more than that, the New Deal regulatory regime had put in place a host of regulatory restraint governing the financial sector and several others. Wall Street managers and traders generally acted after World War II conservatively in lending and investing practices. But that prevailing culture began to change as the Depression faded in the memories of many and regulatory restraints were gradually relaxed. From the mid-1960s through the last financial debacle, there have been 15 U.S. financial crises of various sorts and many others around the world. The recent financial crisis is by far the worst in the post-war period. If not for the intervention of the federal government and the Federal Reserve, however belated, many major financial institutions here and abroad would have failed. All were thinly capitalized and interconnected in the markets, and many held huge off-balance sheet transactions. Now, how did this irresponsible behavior become so widespread? One reason was that the financial markets became increasingly depersonalized. One by one, leading investment banks shifted from partnerships to publicly held corporations, while at the same time their relations with clients became more strict and quantitative in nature.